Today's video is a little different. I just started my financial series. I'm getting some traction with that, so if you're a new subscriber, thank you, welcome. But we really do need to talk about what's happened with the Atlanta shooting, this hate-filled crime that took the lives of 8, 6 of which were Asian women. I'm sure everyone has heard of this already. It's just so heartbreaking, and my heart goes out to the victims, the families, and it's just so senseless. But I'm going to be linking some really good resources that I've seen so far. One of my ideas had originally been to do like an ABG transformation video. I just wanted to talk a little bit about my experience as an Asian American woman growing up in this country while kind of doing that transformation, because there's a lot of things that I feel like this transformation symbolizes with, you know, Asian women being exoticized and fetishized. So let's get started. One of my first encounters with race was when I was in pre-K. I remember getting beat up on the bus. I would bring an umbrella even when it wasn't rainy and protect myself from these attackers. And the bus driver didn't say anything. Like, I don't know why I'm being targeted, but from an early age I had to learn how to protect myself. In middle school there was a play. It was Oliver Twist, and I really wanted one role. I forget exactly what, but it was like some woman who was pretty powerful and had like a speaking role. And I remember my classmates saying, "Oh wow, you did an amazing job. I think you'll really get it." And I remember the role being given to someone else, like a white girl, and I just felt so dejected. And the next year there was another play, and I didn't audition for a role that time. I felt maybe that's just not something that was for me, even though I really wanted to. There are so many instances of like being called a chink, being told to go back to China. So I remember once on the bus in high school, I should be doing something. Some lady, she was going off about how we should go back to China, Asians don't belong here. And being a high schooler, I kind of didn't say anything, and I really wish I had said something. But luckily someone else on the bus, she kind of told the woman off. She's like, "Hey, that's not okay to say. First of all, I'm not even from China, and even if I were, what gives you the right to determine like who deserves to be in this country?" And it's really heartbreaking for me, since I know the sacrifice that my parents made to come to this country, leaving everything they knew for a better future for their future kids. Even in our home country, we're treated like we don't belong. And there's not like there's anywhere else I could go to. Like, I'm not from China. Like, it wouldn't feel like home there. So it's just really upsetting how the system and society here is set up such that minorities don't even feel like they're at home, and like people question whether they belong. So I went to school in Boston, and I actually didn't realize that Boston has such a race issue. Like, it's quite racist, and I didn't notice until I left. I was, hanging out with my friends, and we were just standing around, and some guy came up to us and was saying, "Oh, beautiful Asian girls," and like was following us. And it was really scary for us, being young Asian girls in high school, to have like random men come up to us and say that. Once later on, this guy, random guy on the street, I was having a bad day. I was in an argument with my ex-boyfriend at the time. This dude goes, "Oh, ni hao, you should smile, like why aren't you smiling, cheer up." And I remember turning to my ex and being so upset. Like, I was like, "Oh my god, can you believe he did that?" The ex sided with this catcaller. I can't tell you the number of times that random men on the street have addressed me in different languages, some of which I don't even know, and kind of been upset that I didn't stop to talk to them. Like, what did they think would happen? I went to school, a predominantly white college, and they knew they had a racism issue on campus. I was the president of the Asian organization, and we were called in to talk about race, give our thoughts about what my school could do differently, just try to make it a more inclusive space. And I remember telling my experience as an Asian American on campus and feeling ostracized. Like, back then Yik Yak was a thing. Someone posted on Yik Yak, like, "Why do Asians run to class or fall asleep in the library?" And it had a lot of upvotes, and people were like chiming in like, "Haha, that's such a funny joke." So this white person who was also at the discussion was like, "Oh, it's not a big deal, like Asians don't have it as bad, it's just jokes, it's all fun and games." And I was kind of sitting there like, what gives you the right to say that, invalidate my experiences as an Asian American on campus when you have not gone through that? And the same person also, this is kind of not related, but just related to being a woman in STEM, in computer science. I talked about my experiences doing research at Harvard and having not very many women around me. And he kind of made a side comment like, oh, like that's just because not a lot of women they're not interested in STEM. But actually, if you look at the statistics, like young girls in middle school are interested, but it's just that societally, the way that it's set up and like the environment of these male-dominated fields, it just like deters them from being a part of that. Because why would you want to be a part of an environment that doesn't welcome you and is misogynistic? And even, this is kind of a side tangent too, but even with like putting on makeup, right? So I actually didn't wear makeup really until I started working, and I figured, oh, I could be more professional. But why is it that women have to cover their faces every day just to look professional? Like, it doesn't really make sense to me. Now I find it just more enjoying, relaxing, like with COVID, just like having something creative to do. But I think it's still problematic the way that society values women based off of how they look. Anyways, I'm just feeling like I have to represent my entire race. So for example, like when I first started driving, I was a pretty aggressive driver. And I remember once like someone was like, I guess cursing at me because I did something wrong. And I remember them like looking at me and I was like, oh my god, please don't look at me. Like, it's not because I'm an Asian woman, like it's a stereotype that Asian women are bad at driving, right? Going back to China, they already knew that I was American, I didn't belong there. And then in America, it's already like, well, you don't really belong here either, even though I was born here. So I remember one of my first instances of actually feeling like I belonged was in Singapore. That's because I was in the majority and people would talk to me in Chinese, Mandarin, which is one of the national languages, and I felt like I belonged even though I wasn't even from Singapore. So I went to Malaysia. I was there by myself and I experienced being catcalled still, even though I was around people who kind of looked like me and they were asking if I was Korean. And I remember there were just a bunch of schoolboys, like it was in the middle of the day, so I was walking on the street and a bunch of schoolboys like ran over to the fence to say like konnichiwa to me, and I was just so in shock because I thought that was only a thing in America or like, you know, a Western country. That type of attitude, A, starts at a young age, and B, transcends continents. Like, it's also a thing in Asia. And then it's only gotten worse since COVID, right? I was on the train with my friend. There are these boys on the train and they asked us if we had COVID, and just to be facetious, I was like, yes, I have COVID. And these kids started screaming and running around like, oh my god, COVID. And it was just like crazy because I was like, A, that's no way to act, and B, you can't go around asking people if they have COVID just because they're Asian. And we like left the train because we were like pretty uncomfortable, and then the kids walked, they like, I guess we're switching cars, so they went to our car. And I remember one kid's jaw just dropped to the ground. He was like, oh my god, those are the people who have COVID. And then later that same day, someone asked, it was a cab driver, a taxi driver, and we were talking, my friend and I were talking about something completely unrelated. I think it was either about Japan, like maybe wanting to go to Japan after COVID. And he was like, oh, are you Chinese? I was like, no, even though I am, right? Like having to lie. But like, what gives this random guy the authority to know where my parents are from? Oh, also just the whole, where are you from? No, where are you actually from question. Like, can we not? Anyways, I was kind of just like trying to brush it off, but my friend was like furious. She was like, yo, it's not okay, like that question is not appropriate. And that honestly was the right way to handle it, because I was just kind of let this guy be ignorant, go about my day. But actually, we should take up space. We shouldn't just accept that people are gonna be ignorant. So I really appreciate my friend for doing that. And I do remember being kind of upset one day because my dad, so I visited back home and we went to go play frisbee, and we had masks and everything. It was outdoors in a corner of the park, and this lady who was running, she didn't have a mask. We both had masks, my dad and I. She ran by some white person and it was completely fine, she just ran. But when she ran by us, she kind of, first of all, she looked like I had killed someone. She was just full of disgust and she moved her shirt over her mouth. Luckily my dad didn't see it because I felt like I had to protect him from the reality of this. And like, obviously she didn't hurt us, but it's just that type of, just the way that people perceive you, you can feel it, and it's just not great. Just like being treated like unwelcome even though you live in this country and we had masks was pretty upsetting. When I first moved I bought a condo. When I first moved there, it's predominantly white. The security is really good, which I appreciate. But when I first moved, I was heckled by security because they were like, you don't live here, you're at the wrong place, turn around. I was in a cab and I was like, excuse me, like this is correct, like my stuff is out there, I have the key, like look, here's my key. And they could not believe that an Asian woman could live in this predominantly white, kind of more upper class area. And they literally had me there for 10 minutes maybe, and I was like, I have my closing documents on my phone, like, do you want to see them? And they were like, yes. And the fact that they just didn't trust me, they didn't respect that, or even consider the fact that I could potentially live there, really spoke a lot about how they viewed me. And I guess coupled with the fact that women have only kind of recently been able to take out, like, own property by themselves without, you know, like a husband, it just spoke a lot to me, the fact that they could not believe at all that I could possibly live there. Another thing is I felt like my mom's culture wasn't respected at the hospital. We wanted things done a certain way and they were kind of like, no. And it just felt like they didn't understand, like they didn't see her as a full human. And I feel like in general, like women's pain is not taken seriously. So just the fact that that happened was pretty upsetting. Another thing is just like small microaggressions, right? So I remember seeing a post in a group that was like, or any suggestions for food in the area, anything but Chinese. It could be inane. Maybe they weren't feeling Chinese that day. Maybe they'd already had Chinese. But just the fact that people's connection with me, and for a lot of Asians, is the food. So being like, oh, where are you from? Oh my god, I love Chinese food. I love fried rice. And then having this woman on the internet kind of say like, no, I don't want Chinese. It just seemed more personal than that, even if it wasn't, just from like my past interactions with people. Also just the fact that in the early days, people were so xenophobic that they didn't want to go to Chinese restaurants, even before COVID had hit the States. Like, it didn't really make sense. There's also aggressions against Asian women even in our community. So among Asians, I was told by someone who I care about that women shouldn't have strong opinions and Asian women should be gentle, caring, soft-voiced. And obviously I don't agree with that. Like, I grew up very shy. I was kind of mute almost. Like, I didn't really speak my truth, and it was only till I grew older that I actually began to say what I thought. And so now people might find me too annoying, loud, opinionated. We as women should be able to let our voice be heard. It's just so heartbreaking, the violence that we've seen in this country recently, and not even recently, just like throughout time. In Chinese culture and a lot of different cultures, Asian cultures, you treat people with respect, right? Even strangers, you address them as if they're your family. So like ayi would be like aunt. Some of these women who lost their lives, like if I met them in person, that I would call them my aunt. And so it's just really disheartening to see the amount of disrespect for these women, and also the attacks against the elderly. In Chinese culture also, and many other Asian cultures, the elderly are revered, they're respected, they are wise. It's just the fact that people are out there hurting Asian elderly doesn't make sense either. And I'm like an avid traveler. Things like this make me want to flee, to not be in this country anymore. We can't do that. We have to fight for a better tomorrow. I'm in like the Yang gang. I really appreciate what he's doing, but as a lot of people pointed out, like Asians aren't really taken seriously in politics or anything else. Like when he was first running, you know, the fact that he was missing from a lot of coverage and people are like, who is this guy? Things like this will keep on happening unless we come together, speak up against it. And people think that, you know, we're the model minority, we just do as we're told, but no, like we should rebel. And I feel like that's like part of the ABG thing too. You're kind of, you know, you're rebellious. You don't just do what people expect of you. We spoke up against the atrocities against our like Black brothers and sisters, and now we're gonna speak up for ourselves. I think there is a better future on the horizon. So for everyone who's still here, I just want to say thank you for watching this far and listening to what I have to say. I know like, yeah, a lot worse has probably happened to other people, but just the fact that this experience is so common and we shouldn't have to live like this. It's not normal to be afraid to walk on the streets in your own neighborhood and your own country. So I'll be going back to financial videos, but I think that's, yeah, another reason why I wanted to make this channel, because a lot of like the finance people I follow on YouTube are kind of white males, so just creating a safe space for other types of voices to be heard and showing that, you know, Asian women are not just objects, obviously, but we have intelligence, we have personalities, we have goals, ambitions. So obviously really try to check what's happened, and hopefully our community will come together and do something about it. So thank you. I will see you next time.